I found out my HOA was stealing my heated water when I noticed my utility bills had tripled over the past 3 months without any explanation. My name is Patterson, and I had been living in the Brookside community in Henderson, Nevada for about 2 years. The neighborhood was decent enough, with well-maintained lawns, cookie-cutter houses painted in muted desert tones, and streets that curved in those planned community patterns that made you feel like you were always driving in circles. I worked as an electrical engineer for a solar panel company, which meant I spent most of my time analyzing energy consumption patterns. So when my own water and gas bills started climbing without any reasonable cause, my professional instincts kicked in immediately. The first thing I did was check for leaks. I went through every faucet, every toilet, every pipe I could access. Nothing. My water heater was only 3 years old, well within its efficient operational lifespan. I checked the meter readings myself, comparing them against what the utility company reported. Everything matched up, which meant the consumption was real. Someone was using my water, a lot of it, and they were using it heated. It was a Saturday morning in early March when I decided to do some detective work. I had taken the day off specifically to figure out what was going on. The weather was perfect, that crisp desert morning before the real heat set in. I made myself some coffee and settled into my home office, which had a window overlooking the side of my property where my utility connections were located. Around 9:30, I saw her. Patricia Winters, the HOA president, a woman in her late 40s with that distinctive Karen haircut, the asymmetrical bob that seemed to be standard issue for women who love to complain. She was walking down the street with another HOA board member, Gerald something, a guy who always wore polo shirts tucked into khaki shorts. They were heading toward the community center, which was located about 3 houses down from mine. I watched them disappear around the corner, not thinking much of it until I noticed something strange. About 15 minutes later, I saw Gerald walk back up the street, but instead of continuing past my house, he stopped at my side yard gate. I sat up straighter, setting my coffee down. He looked around, clearly checking if anyone was watching, then opened the gate and walked into my yard. My heart started pounding. I stood up and moved closer to the window, staying back far enough that he would not see me. Gerald walked straight to my utility area, where my water heater was housed in a small external closet. He knelt down, and I saw him reach for something near the base of the structure. There was a valve there, connected to a secondary line I had noticed before but never really investigated. The previous owner had done some custom plumbing work, and I had just assumed it was part of the original setup. Gerald turned the valve, and I heard the distinct sound of water beginning to flow through pipes. Then he stood up, brushed off his knees, and walked back out of my yard like nothing had happened. I stood there, absolutely stunned. They were tapping into my water supply. But for what? I threw on some shoes and headed outside, but by the time I got to the street, Gerald was gone. I walked down to the community center, a small building that served as the HOA office and occasional event space. As I got closer, I heard sounds coming from the parking lot behind it. Voices, laughter, and the unmistakable sound of water spraying. I walked around the building and stopped dead in my tracks. There, in the community center parking lot, was a full car wash operation. They had set up stations with hoses, buckets, soap, and those professional-grade spray nozzles. About a dozen people were washing cars, and steam was rising from the water they were using. Heated water. My heated water. Patricia was standing near a folding table with a cash box, wearing a visor that said Brookside HOA, and a smile that I immediately wanted to wipe off her face. She was collecting money from car owners, running what appeared to be a fundraiser car wash. I walked straight up to her. "Patricia." She turned to me with that fake, pleasant expression that HOA presidents seem to perfect. "Isaac, hello. Would you like us to wash your car? Only $20, and it goes toward community improvements." "You are using my water," I said flatly. Her smile did not waver. "Excuse me." My heated water. "I just watched Gerald turn on a valve in my yard. You have been tapping into my water supply for your car wash." The smile finally cracked, replaced by something harder. "I do not know what you are talking about." "Yes, you do. I saw him. And I have been tracking my usage for weeks. My bills have tripled. You are stealing from me." A few people had stopped washing cars to watch us. Patricia's face flushed red, but whether from embarrassment or anger, I could not tell. "The HOA has a right to community resources. It says so in the bylaws." "Community resources. That's my private utility connection. You have no right to it." "We had an arrangement with the previous owner," she said, her voice getting sharp. "He allowed us to use the water connection for community events. I am not the previous owner, and I never agreed to any such thing. You did not even ask me. You have been stealing heated water from me for months, and I want it to stop immediately." Patricia crossed her arms. "This is for the good of the community. We raise funds for improvements that benefit everyone, including you. Then raise them with your own resources, not mine." "How much have you been using?" She did not answer, just stared at me with that defiant look that said she was used to getting her way. "How much?" I repeated louder. "I do not have those numbers offhand," she said dismissively. "Well, I do. Based on my utility bills, you have been using approximately 3,000 gallons per month of heated water. Do you know what that costs? About $250 monthly in water and gas charges. So for 3 months, you owe me $750, plus whatever you have been taking before I started tracking carefully." "That's ridiculous," Patricia scoffed. "We have been using nowhere near that amount." "Then you would not mind if I call the utility company right now and have them check the meter readings and cross-reference them with your car wash schedule?" Her jaw tightened. "You are being extremely unneighborly about this. And you are being a thief. I want payment for what you have used, and I want confirmation that you will never touch my utilities again." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "Or what? Or I shut off the valve and report you to the police for theft of utilities." She actually laughed at that. "The police? Over a community car wash? They would laugh you out of the station. Theft is theft, Patricia. It does not matter if you are using it to wash cars or water your lawn. You are taking something that does not belong to you without permission or payment." One of the other HOA board members, a woman named Susan something, walked over. "What's going on?" "Isaac is threatening to call the police because we are using water for a charity car wash," Patricia said, making me sound like the villain. "It's my water," I said to Susan. "She has been tapping into my utility line without my knowledge or consent." Susan looked uncomfortable. "I thought we had permission from the homeowner." "We do," Patricia insisted. "The previous owner agreed. I am the current owner, and I never agreed to anything. And even if the previous owner did agree, that agreement does not automatically transfer to me." Susan bit her lip. "Patricia, maybe we should just use the community center's water supply." "It's not heated," Patricia snapped. "Hot water is essential for proper car washing. It cuts through grease and grime better." "Then heat your own water," I said. "Buy a water heater for the community center, but stop using mine." Patricia drew herself up to her full height, which still left her about 4 inches shorter than me. "The HOA board will discuss this matter and get back to you with our decision." "There is no decision to make. I am telling you now, stop using my water. Consider this your official notice. And I am telling you that we will review our bylaws and determine what rights the HOA has to community resources. Until then, we will continue operating as we have been." I could not believe her audacity. "No, you will not. You cannot stop us," Patricia said with a smug expression. "That valve is on the property line, which makes it HOA jurisdiction. The valve is in my yard, connected to my utility meter which I pay for. It is my property." We were at an impasse, and I could see in Patricia's eyes that she had no intention of backing down. She thrived on this kind of power trip, the ability to control and manipulate for what she claimed was the greater good. Fine. If she wanted to play hardball, I could play too. I turned and walked back to my house. Behind me, I heard Patricia telling everyone to continue working, that everything was fine, that some people just did not understand community spirit. The car washing resumed, and I could hear the spray of my water, being used to line the HOA's pockets. Back at home, I went straight to my utility area. The setup was actually pretty clever, I had to admit. The previous owner had installed a bypass line that split off from the main water heater output before it entered the house. The valve Gerald had turned was a simple ball valve, easily accessible from outside the utility closet. There was even a hose connection point, which explained how they were getting the water to the community center. They must have run a hose through the bushes that lined the property. I turned off the valve, cutting off their supply immediately. Then I went a step further. I went to my garage and got a small padlock I used for my toolbox. The valve had a handle that could be locked in place, so I secured it in the off position and locked it. They would need bolt cutters to get to it now. Just to be thorough, I also took photos of everything. The valve, the connection point, the hose running through the bushes, all of it. Documentation would be important if this turned into a legal matter. I had barely finished when my doorbell rang. I walked to the front door and looked through the peephole. Patricia, looking furious, I opened the door. "Yes, you turned off the water," she said accusingly. "Yes, I did. It's my water. You are sabotaging a community fundraiser. I am protecting my property from theft. I could have you fined for non-cooperation with HOA activities. Try it. I will see you in court, and I will bring my utility bills as evidence." Patricia's face was bright red now. "You are going to regret this, Isaac. The HOA has ways of dealing with uncooperative homeowners." "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise. We enforce community standards, and if you do not want to be part of this community, we can make your life very difficult." "Bring it on," I said calmly. "But while you are making threats, remember that theft of utilities is a crime in Nevada. I have photographs, utility bills, and now a witness statement from you acknowledging that the HOA has been using my water supply. So think very carefully about your next move." She opened her mouth, closed it, then turned and stormed off my porch. I watched her march back down the street, her hands clenched into fists. I knew this was far from over. The next morning, Sunday, I found a notice taped to my front door. It was an official HOA violation citation, claiming my lawn exceeded the maximum allowed grass height by half an inch, and that my trash cans were visible from the street outside of designated hours. The fine was $250. I actually laughed. It was such an obvious retaliation that it would be comical if it were not so petty. My lawn was immaculate. I had just mowed it 3 days ago. And my trash cans were in my garage, where they always were except on trash day. I took photos of my lawn and my garage, time-stamped them, and filed them away. Then I sat down and read through the entire HOA bylaws document, all 73 pages of it. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. What I found was interesting. The bylaws were extensive and often overreaching, but there was nothing in them that gave the HOA rights to individual homeowner utilities. There were provisions for shared community resources, like the pool and the common areas, but those had their own dedicated utility connections paid for through HOA fees. I also found several procedural requirements for imposing fines, including mandatory written warnings and the right to appeal. Patricia had skipped all of those steps, just jumping straight to a fine. That was a violation of their own bylaws. Monday morning, I took a personal day from work. I had calls to make and errands to run. First, I called the Henderson Police Department's non-emergency line and explained the situation. The officer I spoke with was sympathetic, but told me it was technically a civil matter unless I could prove intentional theft. He suggested I document everything and consider filing a small claims suit if the HOA would not reimburse me. Next, I called a lawyer. I found one who specialized in HOA disputes, a guy named Robert Chen who had excellent reviews online. His office was in Henderson, so I made an appointment for that afternoon. Robert turned out to be in his early 30s, sharp and professional. He listened to my story, reviewed the photos and utility bills I brought, and nodded thoughtfully. "You have a solid case," he said. "Unauthorized use of utilities is definitely actionable. The fact that they continued after you explicitly told them to stop makes it even stronger." "What are my options?" I asked. "Several. You could sue for reimbursement in small claims court. That would handle the money they owe you. But if you want to stop them from retaliating with bogus fines and violations, we need to go a bit further." "How much further?" "We send them a cease and desist letter outlining their violations, your demands, and the legal consequences if they continue. We also file a formal complaint with the Nevada Real Estate Division, which oversees HOA conduct. If they have been doing this to other homeowners or if there are other violations, it could trigger an investigation." "And the cost?" "For the letter and the complaint, about $1,500. If it goes to actual litigation, that is when costs increase significantly." I thought about it. $1,500 was less than I would spend fighting off their bogus fines and citations if they kept this up. "Let us do it." Robert smiled. "Good. I will draft the letter today and have it sent via certified mail tomorrow. In the meantime, keep documenting everything. Every interaction, every fine notice, every communication. If they try to retaliate, we need records." I left his office feeling better than I had since this whole thing started. I was not just protecting myself anymore. I was going on the offensive. Tuesday, Patricia called an emergency HOA board meeting. I knew because they were required to post notice of all meetings in the community center, and I made a point of checking. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening, and homeowners were allowed to attend. I planned to be there. Wednesday, the cease and desist letter arrived at the HOA office. I knew because Patricia showed up at my door within an hour of receiving it, waving the letter like a weapon. "You got a lawyer," she shrieked. "You are suing the HOA. I sent you a cease and desist for theft of services and harassment," I corrected. "If you read it, you would see my demands are simple. Reimburse me for the water you stole, stop tapping into my utilities, and retract the bogus fines you issued in retaliation. These fines are legitimate violations of community standards." "Really? Then you would not mind if I bring my photographic evidence to the board meeting showing that no violations existed. I am sure the other board members would be interested to know you are issuing false citations." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "You are trying to undermine my authority." "No, I am trying to stop you from stealing from me and harassing me. There is a difference." The HOA will not be bullied by one resident with a lawyer, and I will not be bullied by an HOA president who thinks she is above the law. See you Thursday. I closed the door in her face. Thursday evening, I arrived at the community center 15 minutes before the meeting was scheduled to start. The main room had been set up with rows of folding chairs facing a long table where the board members sat. Patricia was already there, along with Gerald and Susan, plus 2 other board members I recognized but did not know by name. About a dozen other homeowners trickled in. I took a seat in the 3rd row, my folder of documentation on my lap. Patricia called the meeting to order at 7 p.m. sharp. She went through the usual preliminaries, reading minutes from the last meeting, financial reports, upcoming events. Then she got to new business. We need to discuss a situation involving a homeowner who is refusing to cooperate with HOA activities, she began, not looking at me. This individual has cut off access to a water supply that the HOA has been using for community fundraisers. That is not accurate, I said, standing up. Patricia glared at me. You are out of order. Homeowners will have a chance to speak after the board has presented. This directly concerns me, and you are misrepresenting the facts. I have a right to respond. One of the other board members, a man with gray hair whose name I did not know, spoke up. Let him speak, Patricia. We should hear both sides. She looked like she wanted to argue but nodded tersely. I addressed the room. The HOA has been tapping into my private utility connection without my knowledge or permission. This has been going on for at least 3 months, possibly longer. They have been using heated water from my water heater for their car wash fundraisers. This has cost me approximately $750 in additional utility charges. Murmurs went through the other homeowners. When I discovered what was happening and asked them to stop, Patricia refused and claimed the HOA had rights to my utilities. When I shut off the valve to protect my property, she issued retaliatory fines against me for violations that do not exist. I have documentation of all of this. That is a lie, Patricia said loudly. We had an agreement with the previous homeowner. Isaac is simply being uncooperative. Even if there was an agreement with the previous owner, which I have seen no evidence of, it would not transfer to me without my consent. You cannot use someone's private utilities without permission. Susan, the board member who had seemed uncomfortable during our confrontation at the car wash, spoke up. Patricia, is this true? Have we been using his water heater? We have been using a water connection that was set up for community use, Patricia said defensively. On his property. Billed to his utility account, Susan pressed. Patricia did not answer. Gerald cleared his throat. We should probably consult with our HOA attorney about this. We do not need an attorney, Patricia snapped. This is a simple matter of community cooperation. Some homeowners just do not understand that being part of an HOA means contributing to the greater good. Contributing is one thing. Another homeowner spoke up from the back. Stealing is another. If they have been using his utilities without permission, that is theft. It's not theft. Patricia's voice was getting shrill. It's shared community resources. My utility bill is not a shared community resource, I said firmly. And I have already sent the HOA a cease and desist letter through my attorney. If the board would like to avoid legal action, I suggest you reimburse me for what you have taken and agree to never access my utilities again. The gray-haired board member leaned forward. How much are we talking about? Based on documented increases in my utility usage, $750 for the past 3 months, possibly more if they have been doing this since I moved in 2 years ago. That is absurd, Patricia said. We have not used anywhere near that amount. Then you will not mind if we subpoena the utility company's meter readings and cross-reference them with your car wash schedule, I said calmly. The data will show exactly when water usage spiked at my property. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Susan said, I think we need to take this seriously. If Isaac has documentation and has already involved an attorney, we could be looking at real legal trouble. Not to mention the bad publicity, someone else added. Can you imagine if this got out? The HOA would look terrible. Patricia was fuming, her face red, her jaw clenched. Fine. We will pay him his money, but I want it noted that this kind of uncooperative attitude is exactly what destroys community spirit. I want a formal vote, I said, and I want it in the meeting minutes. The HOA acknowledges unauthorized use of my utilities and agrees to reimburse me and never access them again. The gray-haired board member, who I later learned was named Frank, made the motion. Susan seconded it. The vote was 4-1, with only Patricia voting against. Gerald abstained. Patricia looked like she wanted to explode, but she was outvoted and she knew it. After the meeting, several homeowners came up to me. One couple, the Johnsons, told me they had noticed unusual charges on their water bill too, but had never investigated. Another guy, Martin, said Patricia had been issuing bogus violation notices to anyone who questioned her decisions. You should all document everything, I told them. And if you think you have been charged unfairly, contest it. She is counting on people just paying and moving on. She is going to make your life hell now, Martin warned. Patricia does not like being challenged. She can try, I said. But I have a lawyer and documentation. Let her do her worst. The following week, I received a check from the HOA for $750. It came with a curt note saying this was a one-time reimbursement and did not constitute an admission of wrongdoing. I deposited the check but kept copies of everything, because Martin had been right. Patricia was just getting started. Over the next month, I received 6 more violation notices. My house number was half an inch too small. My mailbox was the wrong shade of black. My car was parked 17 inches from the curb when the bylaws specified a maximum of 15 inches. My front door wreath was not in keeping with community aesthetic standards. Every single violation was petty, measurable only with a ruler and a vindictive attitude. And every single one came with a $250 fine. I contested each one formally, following the procedures outlined in the bylaws. I submitted photographic evidence, measurements and citations showing how the alleged violations either did not exist or fell within acceptable ranges per the bylaws. I sent everything via certified mail to create a paper trail. Patricia rejected every appeal, so I went back to Robert Chen. This is textbook harassment, he said, reviewing the stack of violation notices. She is trying to force you out or bankrupt you with fines. What can we do? We file a lawsuit for harassment and abuse of HOA authority. We also file another complaint with the Nevada Real Estate Division, this time with evidence of a pattern of abuse. And we might want to look into whether other homeowners have been similarly targeted. They have. I have talked to at least 5 others who say Patricia has gone after them. Robert's eyes lit up. That is even better. If we can show a pattern of abuse affecting multiple homeowners, we could potentially have her removed from the board. Over the next week, I talked to everyone I could in the neighborhood. Out of the 93 homes in our community, I found 17 homeowners who had been targeted by Patricia with what they considered unjust fines or violations. Most had just paid because fighting seemed too difficult. But when I explained what I was doing, 12 of them agreed to provide statements and documentation. Robert compiled everything into a comprehensive complaint. We sued the HOA for harassment, abuse of authority, and breach of fiduciary duty. We also filed a formal complaint with the Nevada Real Estate Division, including statements from 13 homeowners detailing Patricia's pattern of abuse. The lawsuit hit the HOA like a bomb. Within days, I received a call from Frank, the gray-haired board member. "Isaac, this is Frank Dawson from the HOA board. I am calling personally, not as an official board communication. Okay. I want you to know that several board members, myself included, were not aware of the extent of Patricia's actions. We have been reviewing the violation notices she has been issuing, and frankly, we are appalled. That is good to hear. We are calling an emergency board meeting to discuss her conduct. I cannot promise anything, but I think there are enough votes to remove her as president and potentially from the board entirely. What about the fines she has issued against me and the others? If they are found to be improperly issued, they will be rescinded, but we need to follow procedures." Fair enough. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday. This time, the community center was packed. Word had spread about the lawsuit and the complaints, and homeowners wanted to see what would happen. Patricia tried to maintain control, but it was clear from the start that she had lost the board's support. Frank made a motion to review all violation notices issued by Patricia over the past year. It passed unanimously, with Patricia abstaining. Then Susan made a motion to suspend Patricia's authority to issue violations pending the review. That passed 4-1, with Patricia voting against. Finally, Gerald, who had been silent through most of the conflict, spoke up. "I think we need to address the elephant in the room. Patricia has been using her position to target homeowners who disagree with her. She has issued violations that do not exist, ignored proper procedures, and exposed the HOA to legal liability. I move that we remove her as president effective immediately." The room erupted in applause. Patricia stood up, her face white with fury. "You cannot do this. I have been president for 6 years. I have done more for this community than any of you." "You have abused your position," Frank said quietly. "And you have cost the HOA thousands in legal fees because you refused to admit when you were wrong." "This is a coup," Patricia said. "You are all going to regret this." "The motion is on the floor," Susan said. "All in favor." 4 hands went up. Only Patricia stayed down. The motion passes. "Patricia, you are removed as HOA president. We will need you to turn over all HOA documents, records, and property within 48 hours. Patricia grabbed her purse and stormed out of the meeting, slamming the door behind her. The room was silent for a moment. Then someone started clapping. Soon everyone was applauding, but the story did not end there. 2 weeks later, Frank called me again. "Isaac, we have a problem. We have been going through the HOA financial records and there are some significant discrepancies." "What kind of discrepancies?" "Money missing." "We are still doing a full audit, but it looks like Patricia has been skimming from the car wash fundraisers and possibly other HOA funds." "How much?" "We are not sure yet, but preliminary numbers suggest at least $15,000 over the past 2 years. I felt my stomach drop. This had gone from a dispute over water usage to potential embezzlement. "We are bringing in a forensic accountant," Frank continued, "and we will likely need to involve the police. I wanted to give you a heads up since you are the one who started investigating her conduct. Thanks for telling me. There is one more thing. We found records that show Patricia has been running the car wash fundraisers every week for the past 2 years, not just occasionally like we thought. And based on the utility usage at your property during that time, she has been using your heated water the entire time you have lived here. That is 24 months. Yes, which means she owes you somewhere around $6,000, not $750. I let out a long breath. I want every penny back. You will get it. We are looking into whether we can recover the embezzled funds, but that might require insurance claims and police involvement. The next week, the HOA hired a forensic accountant. I provided all my utility records for the full 2 years. The accountant cross-referenced them with the HOA's car wash income records and bank deposits. The findings were damning. Patricia had been running weekly car washes, bringing in anywhere from $500 to $1,000 per event. But she had only been depositing about half of that into the HOA account. The rest had been going into her personal account. In total, she had embezzled $23,000. She had also been using my heated water the entire time, costing me approximately $6,200 in additional utility charges. The HOA board voted unanimously to file a police report. I filed my own complaint as well, specifically for the theft of utilities. The police investigation took about 6 weeks. During that time, Patricia hired a lawyer and tried to claim that she had permission to take a salary for her work as HOA president. But the bylaws clearly stated that board positions were volunteer only, and there was no authorization for any compensation. She also claimed that the previous homeowner had given her permanent permission to use the water connection, but she could not produce any written agreement, and when the police contacted the previous owner, he denied ever having such an arrangement. In early July, Patricia was arrested and charged with embezzlement and theft of services. The embezzlement was a felony due to the amount involved. The theft of utilities was a misdemeanor, but combined with the embezzlement, it painted a picture of someone who had been systematically stealing from the community for years. Her lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the district attorney's office was not interested. This had become a high-profile case, covered by local news as a cautionary tale about HOA abuse of power. They wanted to make an example. The trial was held in October. I testified about discovering the water theft, the confrontation with Patricia, and her subsequent retaliation. 11 other homeowners testified about improper fines and violations. The forensic accountant testified about the missing funds. Bank records were entered as evidence. Patricia's defense was that she had been working tirelessly for the community and deserved compensation, that the water usage was a misunderstanding, and that any fines she issued were in good faith enforcement of community standards. The jury did not buy it. After 3 days of testimony, they returned a guilty verdict on all counts: embezzlement, theft of services, and abuse of authority. At sentencing in November, the judge was harsh. He noted that Patricia had been in a position of trust and had violated that trust repeatedly and deliberately. He sentenced her to 4 years in prison for the embezzlement, with 18 months to be served before parole eligibility. The theft of services charge added another 6 months to be served concurrently. She was also ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA and to me personally. The HOA's insurance covered most of the embezzled funds, but I received a direct payment of $6,200 from Patricia's seized assets for the utility theft. After the sentencing, Frank approached me outside the courthouse. "I owe you an apology. We should have been paying more attention to what Patricia was doing. If you had not pushed back, she would still be stealing from all of us." "Someone had to stand up to her," I said. "Well, thank you for being that someone." The board has voted to implement new oversight procedures and regular audits. This will not happen again. I shook his hand. I am glad to hear it. Life in the Brookside community slowly returned to normal. The HOA elected new board members, including Susan as the new president. She was thoughtful and collaborative, actually listening to homeowner concerns instead of dictating from on high. The car washes continued, but now they used the community center's own water supply. They had installed a water heater in the storage room, paid for with HOA funds. The fundraisers were properly documented, with all money deposited and accounted for. My utility bills returned to normal levels. I even got a formal letter of apology from the HOA board, acknowledging the unauthorized use of my property and thanking me for bringing the financial irregularities to light. Several months later, in early spring, I was working in my garage when Martin, the neighbor who had warned me about Patricia, stopped by. "Hey, Isaac, got a minute?" "Sure, what is up?" "I just wanted to thank you again for what you did." My wife and I were talking, and we realized we probably would have just kept paying those bogus fines if you had not fought back. You saved us a lot of money and a lot of grief. I am glad it worked out. There is something else. Susan and the board are looking at updating the HOA bylaws to add more homeowner protections and limit what the board can do without approval. They want input from people who understand the issues. I nominated you to be on the review committee. I considered it. Part of me wanted nothing more to do with HOA politics, but another part recognized that this was an opportunity to make sure what happened with Patricia could not happen again. "All right," I said. "I will do it." Over the next several months, I worked with 5 other homeowners and 2 board members to revamp the HOA bylaws. We added clear procedures for issuing violations, including mandatory photographic evidence and a neutral appeals process. We required monthly financial reports to be posted online for all homeowners to review. We limited the authority of any single board member and required majority votes for any expenditure over $500. Most importantly, we added a clause explicitly protecting homeowners' private property and utilities from HOA use without written consent and fair compensation. The new bylaws were presented to the community in August and approved by an overwhelming majority. I had been living in Brookside for over 3 years now, and for the first time, it actually felt like a community rather than a dictatorship. People were more engaged, board meetings had better attendance, and there was a sense that everyone's voice mattered. As for Patricia, I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she was released on parole after serving 18 months. She moved out of Henderson entirely, relocating somewhere in California. I never saw her again, and I was fine with that. The whole experience taught me several important lessons. First, document everything. If I had not kept detailed records of my utility bills and taken photographs, it would have been much harder to prove what was happening. Second, do not be afraid to stand up to authority when authority is wrong. Patricia had counted on people being too intimidated or too lazy to fight back. When someone finally did, her whole house of cards collapsed. Third, there is strength in numbers. Once other homeowners realized they were not alone in being targeted, they were willing to speak up and share their stories. And finally, sometimes the biggest bullies are the ones who talk the most about community spirit and the greater good. Patricia had wrapped herself in the mantle of community service while stealing from the very people she claimed to be serving. One Saturday morning in late fall, I was sitting on my front porch with a cup of coffee, enjoying the cool weather. A moving truck pulled up a few houses down, and I watched a young couple start unloading boxes. New neighbors, I walked down to introduce myself. "Hi, I am Isaac. Welcome to Brookside." The woman smiled. "Thanks, I am Jennifer. This is my husband Tom. We just closed yesterday. Congratulations. If you have any questions about the neighborhood, let me know." "Actually," Tom said, "we heard there was some drama with the HOA here. Something about the president being arrested, I laughed. Yeah, that happened, but it is all sorted out now. The current board is actually pretty reasonable. That is good to hear. We were worried we were moving into an HOA nightmare. Just one piece of advice, I said. Read the bylaws carefully, document everything, and do not be afraid to speak up if something does not seem right. The HOA works for you, not the other way around. Jennifer nodded. We will remember that. I helped them carry a few boxes inside, then headed back to my house. As I walked up my driveway, I noticed the utility area where this whole saga had started. The valve that Patricia had been illegally accessing was still there, still locked. I had considered having it removed entirely, but decided to leave it as a reminder. A reminder that even small acts of theft and abuse of power need to be challenged, because if left unchecked, they grow into much bigger problems. My phone buzzed with a text from Robert Chen, my lawyer. We had become friendly over the course of the case, occasionally grabbing lunch or meeting for coffee. Saw the news. Patricia parole revoked, tried to run another scheme at her new HOA in California, headed back to prison. I shook my head. Some people never learned. I texted back, not surprised. Thanks for the update. Inside my house, I sat down at my computer and pulled up my utility bills. Everything was normal, exactly where it should be. No unexplained spikes, no mysterious usage, just my own consumption paid for with my own money. It was such a simple thing, really. Using and paying for your own utilities without someone stealing from you. But after everything that had happened, I did not take it for granted anymore. The Brookside community had been through a rough patch, but it had come out stronger on the other side. We had better bylaws, better oversight, and a board that actually cared about doing the right thing instead of just wielding power. And me. I had learned that standing up for yourself is not just about protecting what is yours. It is about setting a precedent, showing others that they do not have to accept abuse or theft just because it comes from someone in authority. I finished my coffee and glanced at the calendar. The HOA board meeting was next Thursday, and I had actually been looking forward to it. Susan ran efficient meetings, kept things on topic, and genuinely listened to homeowner concerns. It was night and day compared to Patricia's reign. The review committee was also meeting next week to discuss some minor bylaw adjustments based on feedback from homeowners. Nothing major, just clarifications and small improvements. The process was collaborative and transparent, exactly how it should be, looking back on everything, from discovering that first unusual utility bill to watching Patricia led away in handcuffs. It felt surreal. I had just wanted to figure out why my water bill was so high. I had not set out to uncover embezzlement or take down a corrupt HOA president. But sometimes, life pushes you into situations where you have to choose between looking the other way or doing the right thing. I was glad I had chosen to fight, not just for myself, but for everyone in the community who had been too scared or too tired to stand up to Patricia's bullying. My doorbell rang, pulling me from my thoughts. I opened it to find Frank holding a bottle of wine. "Hey Isaac, I was in the neighborhood and wanted to drop this off. It is a thank you from the board for everything you did." "You did not have to do that." "Yes, we did. You saved this community literally." The insurance company estimated that if Patricia had continued for another year or two, she would have bankrupted the HOA. Your willingness to push back stopped that. I accepted the wine. "I appreciate it. Want to come in for a minute?" Frank checked his watch. "Sure, I have got a few minutes." We sat in my living room, and Frank filled me in on some of the HOA's plans. They were working on upgrading the community pool, all properly budgeted and approved. They were also organizing a neighborhood block party for the holidays, something Patricia had always refused to do because she said it was too much work. "The difference in morale is incredible," Frank said. "People actually want to be involved now. We have volunteers for everything." It is what an HOA should be. After Frank left, I spent the rest of the day working on a project in my garage. As the sun set, I heard kids playing in the street, neighbors chatting over fences, the sounds of a healthy community. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a message in the neighborhood group chat that Susan had set up. Someone was organizing a community garage sale for next month and asking if anyone wanted to participate. I typed back that I was in. A few others responded positively too. It was such a normal, mundane interaction, but it represented something important. A community that functioned properly, where people cooperated because they wanted to, not because they were bullied into it. That night, as I was getting ready for bed, I walked past my utility closet. I could hear the normal sounds of my water heater operating, heating water for my own use, staying within expected consumption levels. It was satisfying in a way that was hard to explain. Not just because I had won, but because I had stood up for something that mattered. Property rights, personal boundaries, accountability, all of it. I slept well that night, better than I had in months. The next morning was Sunday, and I decided to wash my own car. I pulled out my hose, filled a bucket with soap and water, and got to work. The water was cold since I was using the outdoor spigot, but I did not mind. It was my water from my property, used for my purposes. As I was rinsing off the soap, Jennifer and Tom walked by with their dog. "Car wash day," Tom called out. "Yeah, figured it was time." "Mind if I ask where you got your car washed before? We are looking for a good place." I smiled. "There is a place on Sunset Road that does a good job, or the HOA used to run fundraiser car washes, though I am not sure if they are still doing those." "They are," Jennifer said. "Susan mentioned it when we met her yesterday. First Saturday of every month." "Well, they are legitimate now. Used to be some issues with how they were run, but it is all sorted out." We chatted for a few more minutes before they continued their walk. I finished washing my car, dried it off, and stepped back to admire my work. It looked good, and it had not cost me anything but time and effort. That was the thing about the whole situation with Patricia and the HOA. It was never really about the money, though $6,000 was certainly significant. It was about the principle. It was about someone in power thinking they could take whatever they wanted without consequences, and it was about proving them wrong. Over the following weeks and months, life continued its normal rhythm. I went to work, came home, maintained my house, attended the occasional HOA meeting. The neighborhood thrived under Susan's leadership, and the scars from Patricia's abuse slowly faded. I became something of a local legend, the guy who had taken down the corrupt HOA president. People would stop me at the community pool or the mailbox to thank me or share their own stories about Patricia's tyranny. It was a bit embarrassing at times, but I understood why it mattered to them. For years, they had felt powerless. Seeing someone successfully fight back gave them hope that the system could work. The forensic audit of HOA finances turned up even more irregularities beyond what Patricia had been charged with. She had been skimming money from multiple sources, inflating expense reports, and even charging personal purchases to the HOA credit card. The total theft was closer to $35,000 than the $23,000 she had been convicted of. The district attorney considered additional charges, but ultimately decided that the existing sentence was sufficient, especially since she had violated parole and would be serving additional time anyway. The HOA's insurance covered the losses, though our premiums went up as a result. But the board was transparent about it, explaining the situation in detail at a community meeting and answering questions. That transparency went a long way toward rebuilding trust. I also learned that I was not the only homeowner whose utilities Patricia had been stealing. 2 other homes on the edge of the community had experienced similar issues, though not to the same extent. Both homeowners had just assumed they were using more water than they realized. When they heard about my case, they investigated and found evidence of tampering with their utility connections as well. Patricia had been running multiple schemes simultaneously, each one relatively small on its own, but adding up to significant theft when combined. It was calculated and deliberate, the actions of someone who believed they were untouchable. Sitting here now, more than a year after the whole ordeal began, I can honestly say my neighborhood is better for having gone through it. We have better bylaws, better oversight, better leadership. Homeowners are more engaged and informed. The HOA actually serves the community instead of ruling over it, and me. I learned that sometimes the right thing to do is also the hard thing to do. Standing up to Patricia cost me time, money, and stress. But it was worth it, not just for the reimbursement or the satisfaction of seeing justice served, but for the knowledge that I had made a positive difference. My utility bills remain normal. My property remains my own. And the valve that started this whole mess remains locked in the off position, a silent reminder of what can happen when one person decides enough is enough. The end of this story is not dramatic or climactic. There were no final confrontations, no last-minute twists. Patricia went to prison, the HOA reformed itself, and life went on. Sometimes that is how real justice works. Not with a bang, but with steady, persistent effort and a refusal to back down when you know you are right. And if I had to do it all over again, I would make the same choices. Because some battles are worth fighting, especially when the alternative is letting bullies win.